Well, good morning, everybody. This is an unusual talk for me. I do a lot of talks, but this is an unusual one on a couple of fronts. One, I'm using a piece of kit that I've never used before called Tiki Toki. So God only knows how that's going to work out. I'm not talking about anything in particular technical, but I am going to be talking about some kind of context around deepfake scams and frauds, but from a historical perspective. And then instead of asking for questions at the end, you need to have your thinking caps on, because I'm not asking for questions. I'm going to ask you for answers, because I don't know the answers to the stuff that I'm talking about. So I'm hoping that some of you might. So the first thing to say is that deepfakes are not something that were born with AI. Deepfakes are something that have been going on throughout time, and it's only the expression and the technologies of deepfakes that have changed. And it's really important to understand that. And I'm going to show you why at the end of the talk. So let's try and get this technology to work and see what happens. So somewhat unusually for a cybersecurity talk, we're going to go back to the 1500s, and we're going to go back to the time of Henry VIII, who in 1539 was looking for a new missus. We won't go into the reasons why he needed another wife, but he needed a new wife, and he sent Hans Holbein, who is this guy, or not that guy. See what I mean about the technology. So Hans Holbein, the younger, on a tour around what we now know as Europe, looking for nice young women who he could marry. And Hans Holbein made a whole series of paintings, which he took back to Henry, and Henry picked one, which was this one. And the lady in this painting looks really lovely, right? And Henry certainly thought so, because he married her, and she was Anne of Cleves. However, I say he married her, but it was under great duress, because when she turned up at court, she looked absolutely nothing like her portrait, to the point that Hans Holbein was in big trouble. And Henry was peeved, right? He was super peeved. But he married her because he'd signed the contract and that's what he had to do. And then 6 months later, he divorced her because it just wasn't working out. She was too ugly. So this was like the first time, well, not the first time, but a really famous historical time where an image was used to create a misrepresentation of reality to gain access to money and power. Then we move on a little bit. I can't do this with a mic. We move on a little bit. So we're now in the 1600s, and we've got Isaac Oliver is the technology here. He's the painter. And we have Elizabeth I in her very famous rainbow painting. Now, when this painting was made, Elizabeth I was well into her 60s with terrible teeth and hardly any hair and really bad skin. Doesn't look like that in the picture, right? And that's not because Elizabeth I was especially vain, although I'm sure there was some vanity involved, but because she was a female monarch without a king or without a prince consort, and she needed to retain power. So again, we've got manipulation of image in order to retain power. Moving up into the 1700s, we have Bonnie Prince Charlie. So this is an interesting picture. So Bonnie Prince Charlie, he led the Jacobite Rebellion, of course, in 1745, and he looks super cute, right, in the picture on the right. Picture on the left is actually a recreation of what he actually looked like at the point of his death, made recently, I think it's by Edinburgh University. from his death mask. So again, we've got a misrepresentation of reality to create the sense of a powerful figure. So we're going to jump forward in time because it's 15 minutes and we have to get there in the end. So 1800s, 100 years later, photography is becoming a thing. And we have the rise in popularity of death photos. So people wanted to memorialize their dead by having photographs taken with them before they were buried. And we, interestingly, in these photographs, you see the artifacts of the technology, because these photographs depend on being able to stand still for a very long time whilst the exposure happens. But in the photographs with the dead people are in perfect focus because, surprise, they don't move. And the living people tend to be a little bit blurry around the edges. Moving on. So photography gets a bit more advanced. I will not be using this one again. We got the daguerreotype camera, and then we have cameras that become for home use. And we start to see the manipulation of reality again for fame and fortune. So this was the Cottingley Fairies incident, which happened in 1917 to 1920, caused a huge furore at the time. These young girls, they made cutouts of fairies and took photographs of themselves with them and managed to convince pretty much the entire world that fairies were real. And supporters included Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which is big surprise. He's supposed to be good at mysteries, right? And then in the 1920s, cardboard standees, like our lovely Elvis over here, they started to become possible. So we have fake people appearing in the real world. And then life-size standees were very popular in the 1950s. Things like Elvis over here. Please do have your photograph taken with him. And then we start to get into the world of technology. So beginning of email with ARPANET in 1971. We've got the first digital cameras. We've got Photoshop. We've got dial-up internet. It's all happening, right? The world is taking off. And it's all becoming domestically accessible. So, of course, what happens when humans get their hands on technology? The answer is all sorts of bad shit. So here we are, we've got like a brief timeline of all the apps coming up, all the scams, Zoom, TikTok, the introduction of filters on stationary images. Lots of scams. And then we start to see the arrival of AI. So we have Channel 4's Queen's speech in 2020, which caused a bit of a furore. We'll just do a quick couple of seconds on that. Oops. More. That one. Oh, well, we have it without sound, apparently. But basically, this sounds just like Queenie doing her normal Queen speech, except she's making sort of snide remarks about Harry and Meghan going off to Canada and how rude that is. And at this point, people are starting to question AI and how it shapes our sense of reality and who we are and stuff. And then there was a big scandal in 2021 around Victoria's Secret. Now, I'm looking at the audience. Who knows what Victoria's Secret is? Right, okay. So Victoria's Secret, for those who don't know, is a lingerie company that is renowned for having ridiculously beautiful models, ridiculously beautiful. But all sorts of stuff started to come out about how the models were being photoshopped in all of their images. So actually, even Victoria's Secret model didn't look like a Victoria's Secret model, and the girls were being pressured into looking like the fake people that were being presented. And there's all sorts of pushback on that. So you can see I had a lovely video of this where there's a meme where people singing, but no sound, so sadly not. Then we get into 2022 and the Martin Lewis scam with Elon Musk. So Martin Lewis, I don't know if you're all familiar with Martin Lewis, but he talks about financial affairs and things and gives consumers advice about what to do about money. And an AI persona was made of him, and he was digitally kidnapped, basically, in a scam that was to do with Elon Musk. Not the real Elon Musk, like a fake Elon Musk. And he was furious about it, and it was all over the news. But up to this point, it was kind of all right. I mean, it's bad, right, that Martin got kidnapped, but it was kind of all right because we had this protection of a delay. Because up until this point, AI technologies, they're very resource hungry, right? So they take time to make, and they cost a lot of money because you need a lot of machine to make them. But then this happened, and we got to deepfake Elvis on America's Got Talent in 2022. I swear to God, I have not been able to sleep since I saw this performance. I don't know if this one will play or not. We'll see. Oh, apparently that one doesn't have music or sound. Right. I am not going to break out into an impromptu rendition of Devil in Disguise, but what happened on America's Got Talent is a company called Metaphysic.ai came on as a contestant, and they became Elvis Presley on stage in real time, and that was voice and image. Real time, folks, that's a game changer. If you can do this in real time, we're in trouble. We are in trouble in terms of how we move forward from here. And in addition to this, something came out recently, very recently actually, only a couple of months ago I think, in Psychology Today, talking about the impact of beautifying filters on the mental health of young women and girls. Now apparently these filters are having such an impact on women and girls that the suicide rate amongst this demographic of heavy social media users and young and female, suicide rate has risen alarmingly. And they're seeing a lot of dissociation between your young girls and their real bodies, their real lives, and young girls and their virtual presentation in a digital world. And that is really scary. So, obviously, things are continuing. All sorts of new technologies come along. But here we get to the questions that I have for you. And the first is a cybersecurity question. So the cybersecurity question is this. How do we respond to technologies that allow anyone to be anyone else, auto-generated, dead or alive, as real-time, convincing screen presences? Facial recognition, voice recognition, are these dead technologies now? Are they redundant as verification technologies? So that's question one. And question two is, how do we respond to the growth of technologies that history is telling us we will use to the point where they damage our well-being? How do we protect our children who are growing up with these technologies and have known nothing else? So that's the end of my talk. I'm open to your answers. Thank you.
Everybody got the answers?
Yeah.
On question one, I think what usually drives the controls is to do with lawsuits and litigation, and I think what we'll find is when we see companies being sued by the likeness, say if it's an actor or a politician, I think we'll see possibly controls then come out, because once you impact the rich and powerful, they tend to make things happen to protect themselves. So, sort of the answer for question one is around that. However, in the everyday, tech support, I have a user calling MGM tech support and they want to reset their password and this and that. We don't know, right? So we have to come up with other factors, just like we do with MFA for logging in. I think we need to come up with some more stringent multi-factor approach to validate the person is who they say they are.
Well, currently we don't have the technology in place for detection of the generation. So I think we actually might be looking at something like multi-factor human authentication, where we're teaching people to verify in analog channels.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the best I can come up with, but I'm really hoping to be able to get better.
It's almost like you share a secret. Like back in the day, we would pass a number, they knew the sum, and so they would pass the number to make the sum.
Yeah.
So maybe something like that is a private shared question between us that we only know the answer to.
Yeah. So like a key to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trusted encrypted channels, so that if you knew that you had to do a certain thing, you would only use a certain channel to show you access to that point in time, so that naturally, unless it was, you wouldn't get that normally intercepted. But for me, the technical side of things, you can already see edited documents, so Photoshop documents with the ACDR document shaped. As technology advances and biometric cameras become more normal and that sort of thing, they can start picking up bits. They're telltale, they're little flags, they're not necessarily a thing that we work back as a zero trust model in the future, sort of a confidence score almost to say that even this person is person or not, then that might help. But on the second point, it's quite interesting, something I talk about quite a lot at work is we look at the user today through our eyes, not through theirs. So for me, my first computer was early 2000s. I broke it multiple times, I rebuilt it, I got another one person to fix it. My daughter, for example, she's 12 now, so she's in this target range. But every time something new's happened with both sides, being open, being honest, it's the limitations around the use of, and then relaxing those are more confident, and we can trust with it. I think for the human question, definitely it's about education. It's about getting it out there, getting people to see that this happens, but doing it as a way that you're not blaming anyone. It's a case of this is what's out there, this is what happens, be aware of it. Same with vaping, and the rest of it, it's all come back to the same thing.
I wonder if we're going to see, because we get generational cycles, right? I wonder if we're going to see a generational pushback on technology from new generation coming up, saying actually we don't want all this tech, we don't want all this social media, we want to go out for a walk and we want to do this. I think that'd be interesting to see if that ever happens. Actually,
my daughter's in her 30s, and she and many of her friends push back against social media. They don't want anything to do with it. They recognise its impact on their mental health, its everything else.
yeah.
And they just stick to it. So they only use it when it's absolutely necessary, like internet work.
Yeah.
But they certainly wouldn't do Facebook or TikTok or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's gone, but I just wonder what it's going to be like to grow up as an AI child.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Would you become so numb to it that you don't see it as a real world?
Or would it even matter?
Because at that point, would you be doing it? Would you be an avatar yourself?
Yeah.
And if everyone's doing it, it becomes the normal. It's no different to then having a character on Netflix or whatever. And if we get to the point of everyone seeing it like that, then the risk goes is that crossover period.
We're getting into Black Mirror territory now, aren't we?
the younger generation will be okay because something's already there. It's the current generation that's going to have the issue.
Yeah.
That transitional thing.
Just like we were when there was no authentication on every email accounts, there was no security in place when the first started using it.
Yeah.
That long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other points in the room? No, let's give it up for the amazing Janette. Thank you so much, Janette. Thank you.